Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be checking out the Eachine LAL5. This is a 4-6S plug and fly 5-inch model, but it's a really strange one because I'm not sure what it's trying to be. The top plate isn't quite long enough for it to be a freestyle model. Now, I define a freestyle model as having a top-mounted battery, giving it a better center of gravity compared to a bottom-mounted race drone, and then some sort of HD camera up top to get the props out of shot. And that definition is subjective because some people do like to have the props in shot. In fact, that used to be the case with me until I started flying at really epic locations with friends, and their footage always looked better than mine because they had captured the location in a way that something like a DJI Mavic could never do, but with a similar video quality and the props out of shot, which means that the footage can be used in a professional capacity. So with this model having the Caddx Tarsier HD hybrid camera up front, the shorter body length will get the props in shot, unless you have a crazy camera angle on it. So maybe the model is aimed at people who either want to fly like that or have the props in the recorded view. But hold that thought, because I had a major problem with the Tarsier on this model. I set everything up, and when I armed the motors, the on-screen display was flickering like crazy and I was getting a load of lines through the goggles. Usually this is an indication of a grounding issue, so I spent about 2 days trying different ground pads on the flight controller to no avail. But then my friend Wayne, aka Curry Kitten, messaged me and said, "Have you received the LAL5? Because I'm going to be working on it next." And I said, "Wayne, could you do me a massive favor? Just set up your LAL5 and arm it to see if you are getting the same issues that I'm having." And he did all of that, and he got the same issues. What baffled me is at this point some big YouTubers had reviewed this model and not mentioned the issue at all, and crucially weren't including any DVR footage in their video. Now, I don't usually go looking at other reviewers' videos because it can taint my own perspective of it, but I wanted to get to the bottom of this video problem. So either they were sent something different than me or they were covering it up, so I'll let you be the judge of that. Anyways, after a few messages from Eachine, they came back to me and said that the problem is being caused by the holes in the bottom plate not being big enough for the metal screws that come with the Tarsier board, which was causing the screws to make contact with the carbon, and that created a ground loop. So they told me to replace the screws with plastic ones and told Wayne the same. The problem is I didn't have any M2 plastic screws, and to order some from China would take weeks, so Wayne managed to find these white ones in the UK, so thanks to Curry Kitten for that. And Eachine say that they have fixed this issue going forward, but I just want to warn you guys about it in case they actually haven't. It's also got a really strange motor size for a 5-inch model. They are a 2507 1850 kV with a hollow shaft and a hex screw to secure down the bell, so they are a really good quality motor and are very aesthetically pleasing in this gold colour, but this stator size is more suited for a 7 or 8-inch model, and it's going to eat batteries on the provided 5046 DAL props. Now, I think it would fly pretty nice as a freestyle model on 4S, but to stand a chance of not killing your lipos on its first flight, you're going to need to use at least an 1800 milliamp 4S or a 1300 milliamp 6S lipo, and I think any lower capacity than that will cause the battery voltage to sag below 3.3 volts per cell on large punch outs, and the chemistry of the lipo will start to break down very fast if that happens. I even think that could happen with larger capacity lipos, so I'll have to see how that pans out. The frame is using 5mm individual arms, which are sandwiched between a 2mm upper and bottom plate. Interestingly, there is a cutout for a LiPo strap to go at the bottom. I guess this is in case you want to mount something like a GoPro on the top plate, because there wouldn't be enough room for a suitable LiPo and a GoPro to both fit on the top plate. However, the model came with its strap and non-slip mat mounted on the top plate. I did have to use a slightly longer battery strap, which is provided in the package because the stock one won't wrap around my suggested larger capacity LiPos. You're given a spare non-slip pad, but again it's for the top plate, so if you did want to bottom mount a battery, you'd need to add your own non-slip mat, otherwise the LiPo would get slung in a crash. The stack consists of a 4-in-1 32-bit D-Shot 1200 ESC board rated to 50 amps with a built-in current meter. They have added a 35-volt 470 microfarad low ESR capacitor connected to the battery terminals. It's not a brand I've heard of before. My preference is either Rubicon or Panasonic for low ESR capacitors, and we also have an XT60 connector for your battery. The model doesn't come with a battery, you have to supply your own. According to the specs, the flight controller has been customized by Eachine and is based around the Maytech F405 target. It's actually a really capable flight controller with built-in Bluetooth, so you can use the SpeedyBee app to adjust the Betaflight settings wirelessly. It's also got a 10-volt regulator with a 2-amp BEC, which is powering the VTX, and a 5-volt 2-amp regulator, which powers the Tarsier camera and the receiver. It's got 2 spare UART, so you can use any receiver protocol that you like. It comes with a servo connector hanging out of the back, and there is just enough room to mount an XM Plus with pins soldered to it. I've got mine wedged just underneath the Tarsier board, and it did come set up in Betaflight for FrSky out of the box. There's this 3D printed TPU mount with holes for your antennas, but unfortunately they didn't provide any straws, so I've borrowed these ones from a AndyRC model. The stack doesn't seem to be soft mounted at all, but there is a micro SD card slot for black box recording and diagnosing if you can be bothered with that sort of thing these days. It came flashed with Betaflight version 4.03, and they have put a little bit of setup in there, but you're going to need to be accustomed to Betaflight to get the best out of this model. For example, the PID loop frequency was set to 8K 2K, and the flight controller is more than capable of 8K 8K. The motor idle speed was set to 2.5%, which is a guaranteed death roll unless you up it to 6%. The RSSI was set to ADC, which is an external RSSI source, so if you don't turn that off, then the internal RSSI firmware on the XM Plus won't work, and I moved the on-screen display around a little bit as well. The VTX supports 40 channels including raceband, and it's power switchable from 25mW up to 800mW via smart audio. It's using an MMCX connector, but I have to say I am not a fan of how they have mounted the antenna. First of all, it was discovered by Menace and Painless360 that wrapping the active element of a VTX's antenna in TPU detunes it. And second of all, the signal is going to get blocked by the top mounted battery with the antenna mounted this low. I'm not going to go through all of the features of the Tarsier because I did that extensively in my AndyRC Cine Pro 4K video, so I'll add a card to the top right of this video if you aren't familiar with it. I will, however, mention that they have removed the wires for the controller board to change the settings of the bottom FPV camera, so you're not given the controller board in the package, and the FPV camera is stuck with the stock settings in a 4:3 aspect ratio. Of course, you can still use the Wi-Fi and the Caddx app to change the settings of the top HD camera. A lot of people don't like the Tarsier camera, especially with the micro SD card exposed like this, because first of all, it has to be an expensive micro SD card and there's no protection. However, having had colossal crashes with models that have these Tarsier camera boards, I'm yet to have an SD card ping out. They are wedged in there pretty solid. The camera end appears to have the V1 lens on it. If you message Caddx on Facebook, they will send you a V2 lens for free, which has a wider field of view. I'm of course not happy to see the camera mounted in TPU. I'm so tired of repeating myself on this subject, so I'll add a card to a video that I made on why it's a really bad idea to mount CMOS cameras in TPU, especially on a 6S model with crazy motors. They do provide an ND filter in the package, which I think might work with a 4S LiPo, but I think the vibrations are going to be too intense on a 6S LiPo to save the video from getting any jello. It's a really heavy model as well, with a dry weight of 420 grams, but that's mostly going to be because of the big motors. If you don't run a GoPro and use the Tarsier camera for your HD footage, then it's actually lighter than a standard freestyle model, but it's double the weight of a modern 5-inch race drone. With an 1800 mAh 4S GMB LiPo, it weighs 635 grams, and with a 1300 mAh 6S LiPo, its weight is a whopping 654 grams. Left in the box are some spare screws and some carbon fiber spanners, as well as this machine gun that was originally to hold the belt in place while you tighten up the directional motor nuts. However, it doesn't fit these motors, so I guess you can put it on your keyring to use in defense when approached by misinformed members of the public. And lastly, you are given a spare set of the dowel props and a bunch of stickers, but it does not come with a manual. Okay, this is a line of sight flight with an 1800 milliamp GMB 4S. I think it needs to be 1800 milliamp with these motors, and even then I don't think you'll get a long flight time, and I think the voltage will sag straight away. Let's go for a punch out. It's got plenty of power on 4S as a freestyle model, that's for sure. But I'm like, what is this? Is this meant to be a freestyle model, or is it meant to be a racer? It's really difficult to say. For me, a freestyle model has to have the props out of shot. That's not the case for everybody. By the way, apologies for how misty and gloomy it is. Would you believe it's 2:30 in the afternoon, and probably got about 20 minutes of usable light. But anyways, on 4S, it's pretty nice. Well, line of sight though, you see, I think FPV, I don't think you'll get a long flight time, and I think these motors and these props will really be abusing the battery. Anyways, that's acro. Flick it back into angle. See if we've got any drift at all. It's a pretty calm day today, and that should be the way that the wind is blowing. Yeah, not really drifting. So this next one is an unbranded, for the moment, test battery that I've got, but it is from a reputable company that I've been sent to test. It's 1300 milliamp, and once again, I think even at that capacity it is going to drop its voltage pretty quick. But let's see what the punch is like with this battery.
Wow. Disappears. You know, it's been quite some time since I have done a line of sight punch out. So this seems really fast. Oh, it's noisy as well on 6S. So I think the motors are going to be okay. It's the batteries that it's going to destroy, I think. But yeah, it's pretty quick. You know, normally a freestyle model, you would say, you don't really want it to be that quick. You know, 70 miles per hour, that's plenty for freestyle. You go above that, then it starts becoming a race model. And this one, I mean, it's been quite some time since I have done punch outs like that, but this is kind of like race pace, you know, maybe near 100 miles per hour or something like that. Maybe I'm just out of touch though, because like I say, it's been a long time since I've done a line of sight with a fast model, because usually I just do the speed test, you see. And now I've seen this, I am going to do a speed test with it, but it's kind of one of those models where I'm like, what is it? Is it a race copter or a freestyle copter? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments. But again, on 6S, I think it's just stock settings and it's flying fine. So let's get some FPV flights in before I completely lose the light.
So this first flight was done with the 1800 milliamp 4S GMB LiPo, and I've got my speed trap set up. So first of all, let's see what the top speed of this model is with a 4S LiPo. So that's 76 miles per hour, which is about correct for a freestyle model, and the LiPo's voltage didn't sag below 14 volts. With a 4S model, you're going to want to be landing at 14 volts. However, I've got a feeling that as I do more of these punch outs, that it's going to drop below 14 volts very quickly. So let's pay attention to the voltage on this one. Now, it didn't drop below 14 volts and it got 76 miles per hour again, but it did get very close to 14 volts and we're only 45 seconds into the flight. So that doesn't bode well. However, you could say if you were flying this model in a freestyle capacity, you wouldn't be on the throttle all of the time. Let's see what the voltage does this time, and it drops into the 13s at just 1 minute in. Now, if I switch to the HD footage, if you're a regular subscriber of the channel, you will know that my favorite setting on the Tarsier camera is the 1440p mode, which is a 4:3 aspect ratio, but I dynamically stretch it to 16:9 to give an ultra-wide field of view. I can only apologize for the weather. There's not a lot I can do about that, but what it does show with these gloomy conditions is that potentially on a sunny day with the ND8 filter installed, you should get pretty decent video that is Giallo free, because all an ND8 filter does is block sunlight, which slows down the shutter speed of the camera, and you don't get any Giallo. I don't think we will get that with the 6S setup, but I will have to see. If I switch back to the DVR footage, I am still getting some noise through the video, and it's coming from the ESCs, but it's also got a little bit of interference when the motors aren't spinning, so there's definitely some kind of RF issue there. I'm not sure if it's going to show up on YouTube. It's not debilitating, but I thought I'd mention it because it's important to me as well as a lot of people. There's also no audio coming through from the VTX, so if you are somebody that likes to have the audio coming from the model while you're flying, then it doesn't have that. Of course, the Tarsier camera does record it, but it doesn't feed it through live. The current meter is also out as well. This is an 1800 milliamp battery, and we're just coming in for a landing here at 14 volts, and it's only showing 1000 milliamps, and it should be 1800 milliamps, so that is incorrect and needs adjusting in beta flight. The flight time is just over 3 minutes, but I have been heavy on the throttle. So onto the 6S 1300 milliamp LiPo, and already I'm seeing more noise through to the video feed, but let's see what the top speed is now on 6S. 93 mile per hour, and it drops instantly to 18 volts, which is very damaging to the LiPo. So yeah, this is not a good setup for 6S whatsoever. Let's see this time. Into the 18s, 96 mile per hour. Yeah, so that is a race copter sort of speed, but it's really defeating the purpose of 6S with a model. The idea of 6S is to have the efficiency, but with the same speed as 4S, and this is doing the opposite, so it's going to absolutely destroy 6S LiPos. Yeah, it's doing 97 mile per hour, but on its first punch out, it's dropping to levels that is going to destroy the battery within maybe just a couple of flights. So yeah, no good as a 6S model, and yeah, just mediocre really as a 4S model. So it all comes down to, would I recommend this model? And I think there are better options out there. Of course, you've got the Tarsier camera there, and if you like the props in shot, then maybe. But yeah, I saw as well then some vibrations coming through to the camera, so even with an ND filter in 6S with this model, I think you're going to get some extreme jello on high throttle. But for me, I think the Nazgul 5 is still king when it comes to 6S and also budget. And for 4S, I think I'd go with the SkyStars Starlord because it's got a slightly better VTX. Now, the VTX on the Nazgul 5 doesn't bother me. You do get a little bit of lines, not interference, just these strange lines every so often, but it doesn't seem to affect the range, so I've kept mine like that. But yeah, if you want 4S, then the SkyStars Starlord would be my pick, and I wouldn't go for this one. It's not my thing, but if you're watching this video and you like what you see, then I will put a link in the description to it, as well as a link to my other recommendations. I'm just trying a bit of freestyle here, and the voltage is holding a little bit better, but the reason that I'm actually doing freestyle is so that the voltage doesn't sag. But look at that, 3 minutes and I'm coming in for a landing. So that is my review of the Eachine LAL5. Thank you so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.